This is the Q&A with Deandra Wardell from her Kata in the Community webinar. For the webinar presentation audio, look for the previous episode here in this podcast feed. Deandra, maybe we'll start with, I think, a relatively simple tactical question from Heinz.
Sure.
What's the name of the blue reminder card that you showed? Where can people get that Kata card?
Okay. The name of this card is called the 5-question coaching card, and it is actually available on and one link I did not have handy, but if you Google Toyota Kata, or if you go to Mike Rother's Twitter, there are all type of resources that Mike freely shares, and one of them is this Kata card. And actually, I do have where you can find it. It is in the Kata in the Classroom information, katatogrow.com. KATATOGROW.com. That's also where you can find the information to run a Kata in the Classroom simulation. So that's where you can find that information.
And thank you to Eric. He beat me to the punch. He copied and pasted the link to Mike Rother's Coaching Kata website, which has that card that you can download and print and use. Part of all of the, we love Mike's book, the Toyota Kata, but he has a lot that's just freely available on his website. We've got a couple of questions that are in a similar theme about becoming a coach. So I'm going to read a couple related questions and maybe you can combine them. Is there a preferred level of skill or credential for someone to be a coach? What's the minimum number of Kata coaching cycles? Or what are the number of cycles of Kata that a coach should go through? So I guess being a learner, how many cycles should you go through before trying to be a coach? How important is it to be proficient in lean and other continuous improvement methods to coach this process? Those are the three related coaching questions. What do you think, Deandra?
Yeah, so those are all excellent questions. And I want to start out with addressing, how long or how many cycles should you go through to be a learner? There are different schools of thought around this. Some recommend 20 cycles, or there's a number of storyboards that are recommended that you go through at least up to 10 storyboards. But the main thing in terms of being a learner, you want to start practicing. And along the way, because you're going to learn something, with each experiment, and the closer and closer you get to your target condition, and you'll be able to recognize when, and your coach will guide you when you're ready to take on your next target condition, when you're ready to start your next storyboard. Now, in terms of being a coach, there's no quote unquote certification that is required, although there are certifications that are being offered. I know Tilo Schwartz does offer a certification, but in true improvement kata, coaching kata fashion, you learn by doing. And when you start out as a coach, that's where it's very important to have the second coach. I remember when I introduced the Toyota Kata to my organization, there were only 2 of us who knew about the Toyota Kata. It was myself and a member of my team. And we had a need to accelerate it. And so that's where Tracy Defoe was so helpful, that she came in as, as a consultant and coached me. And then as I was learning, as I had my storyboard and I needed to coach the member of my team, Tracy served as a second coach and, would monitor and observe, each one of those coaching sessions, and then would give me feedback, when it was her and I one-on-one, or sometimes I would ask for that feedback to be shared within that coaching session at the end with the learner, because that particular learner had aspirations and there were plans and goals for that person to become a coach. So, it's, there can be situations where To learners, you've read the book, you may have gone through the online training that's offered by Dr. Liker, you've experienced Mike Rother's website, you have limited coaches within your facility, but you want to start out small. You want to start out with a small process that's close to what your daily work is. But then also you can reach out and, have an external coach to come in and help. Now, the third question about the tools, I am so appreciative of whoever it is that asked that question, because people have this assumption that I need to be, have a certification, Lean Six Sigma certified, have this huge background. And one of the things that makes the Toyota Kata so practical and useful for everyone is it focuses on the scientific thinking approach. It's those 4 steps. And what you find is that when you have a target condition you're trying to reach, and whatever that obstacle is that you perceive that's preventing you from reaching that target condition, usually what happens is you'll discover, one of the lean tools may arise that that you will need to use as a way of practicing, experimenting, and getting you closer to your target condition. So as an improver or a learner, do you have to know the ins and outs of lean tools? No. As a coach, I do think it's helpful that you are familiar, with the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle and some of the other tools that are available to help guide. And it's not about I'm teaching you these tools, but oftentimes from whatever obstacle, whatever it is you want to experiment, the need for a tool arises. And sometimes it's the case the improver or learner discovers that. They may not know exactly what that tool is, but that's an opportunity when the coach can introduce it.
Thanks, Yandra. There's 2 different questions I'll combine, asking about Kata and A3. First off, how does Kata differ from the A3 process? Both identify problems, set targets, root cause, and countermeasures or experiments to improve. And then Beth asks, is the difference between Kata and an A3 the size of the improvement or project?
Okay. So, the Kata and the A3 are very interconnected. And I want to, if you remember the slide where I showed as you're experimenting between the current condition and the target condition, and how you're running those Plan, Do, Check, Act cycles along the way of whatever it is you're experimenting with. So, Plan, Do, Check, Act is embedded, or Plan, Do, Study, Act is embedded in the A3. And what we're looking at in an A3, you want to understand your current condition. You want to look at what your target condition, what it is, your target that you're trying to set. You want to understand what's at the root. Why is there a gap between the current and the target condition? And as a result of addressing those root causes, that's how you determine, well, what countermeasure it is that you want to take. And as a result of implementing or piloting that countermeasure, you want to go back and study it. What was your hypothesis about what this countermeasure would address? And what was the outcome? And if it was what you expected, well, then how can we standardize this and make it part of the process? And if it wasn't what you expected, well, then what's the next experiment we need to run? And it follows that Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. And all of that mirrors and it complements perfectly the steps of the Toyota Kata, because the big thing is that I think the Kata helps us with is the alignment, especially within organizations, because we have huge strategic goals that we want to reach, or these objectives, these long-term objectives that may be phrased as a challenge, but we have to start somewhere. And we may not be exactly sure the steps that we're going to take to achieve whatever the milestone is. And so the Kata helps us to have to be open to thinking about new things, to be thinking outside the box, to really delve into that creativity. It really encourages and the role of the improver and the coach working together, which that should be the relationship that's mirrored between employees and managers and supervisors and what have you. And it's about, working together to reach a goal, and you're documenting it along the way. And the slide I had shared with the starter kata, one of the tools that's on there, and it's also on the website, are the PDCA cycle records. And so whatever it is you're going to experiment or you want to test is documented in those records. The difference with the improvement kata is the experiments are more rapid. you're testing things daily. We hear about Kaizen events or A3 events, as some companies even call them, where they may be one time. The difference is the improvement kata and the coaching kata gets us to practicing daily. So we see improvements, we see these skills being built on a more rapid and frequent basis because it's part of our daily habit and our daily practice.
I mean, and I'll ask a follow up. I'm still new to Kata. I call myself, I have a T-shirt that says "Lean Geek." I haven't earned the title Kata Geek, but like when I look at the improvement Kata model, root cause is not specifically spelled out. And in my experience, like I don't take it as dogma that we always need to find a root cause. Like for small Kaizen improvements or for other situations, if we have a reasonable countermeasure to test, or we could say if we have a reasonable next experiment to run, that can be in lieu of root cause analysis. Do you agree with that, Deandra, or what would you say?
I do agree with that. And I think something else that's really important about the kata, and as it relates to root cause, because in the very first, or in the second step, when you're grasping the current condition, and there's actually on page 99 of the Toyota Practice Guide, there is a current condition analysis. And what it really helps us to do is learn as much as we can about the process, study how the process operates, study the patterns, checking equipment capacity, calculating the customer demand rate, the plan cycle time. We want to understand everything about how the process performs. And, what I have experienced as a learner and even as a coach, as a result of diving deep in that process and understanding how it operates with whatever target we're setting that we want to accomplish, oftentimes something is observed as a result of studying that process that really guides us to the next step that we want to practice. And when we think about those obstacles or what we perceive as preventing us from reaching that target, that's where we're drilling and getting to and figuring out, is this really an obstacle? Is this, it's something that we need to do further root cause analysis? And that's what leads us and guides us to running those experiments. And so although, those steps are not spelled out, and Mark, Rosenberg, what is
Rosenthal.
it?
Mark Rosenthal.
Rosenthal. I'm trying to give him a new name. Mark Rosenthal on his website, The Lean Thinker, does an excellent job of showing the correlation between the A3 and the Toyota Kata. And again, for me, what makes the Toyota Kata so useful is because it's so practical. And whether you're from a continuous improvement background or a lean background, or you're a lean geek or kata geek, you can still learn it and you can still apply it to whatever process it is that you're seeking to improve, or whatever skill it is you want to develop, or whatever skill it is you want to learn.
Thanks, Deandra. We've got so many good questions, even though my voice gave out there. We can continue for a couple minutes.
Sure.
We'll share the full recording for anyone who has to drop off. You're talking about targets, and Eric asks a question here. What level of clarity might be required regarding defining the challenge or target conditions to most effectively use the improvement kata?
Okay, so I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. Is it the case that, is it trying to understand how specific you need to be about the target? Is that?
I mean, like, to me, that would be a form of clarity. Like, another way of asking this maybe is, how do we know if we've stated the challenge or target conditions correctly or at the right level?
Okay, so that makes sense. So first of all, the thing to keep in mind about the challenge, challenge typically comes from above. So if you think of in an organization, the challenge is something that comes out of the work of strategic planning, is typally shared from the supervisor or a member of management, and that's the overall, what we're trying to accomplish within, a longer term, 6 months, 3 years, or what have you. So the challenge should be very clear. When you look at the current condition or the target process that you want to work on, the learner should be focusing on a process that's a part of their daily work. And so when I shared the example earlier about working in a printing and packaging company, the senior leaders come up with their visions and strategies of what it is they want to accomplish for the customers. But when you look at those people who are working in the press room, their work is specifically related to the output of that press in terms of the product that they're delivering. So whatever their target condition is, their target condition should be a part of their work. It's a part of their target process. But whatever goal it is that they've set or objective that they've set, it should be aligned with what the vision is. It should be aligned with what the challenge is. So if it is the case that a company says, wouldn't it be great if our customers received their product when they requested it on time and in the way in which they paid for it, whatever finishes or whatever coatings. And so that press room operator may find some challenges with setting up their machine in such a way that gets the coating right on the first time. Okay, they may have to run something through multiple times because something is off with the ink or with the coatings. So their target condition, it may be small enough of, how can I improve upon getting the exact settings to run this particular job the first time? That may be my target condition, and that's something that I want to accomplish within 4 weeks. And so that person will look at the current condition and look at how they currently set up the press to run the coatings. And is it, a matter of, and again, they're not trying to problem solve. They want to understand everything about that process, because as a result of understanding everything about the process, that will lead and guide them into the next steps they want to take to reach that target condition that they've set for their work. And again, that target condition aligns with the overall challenge about delivering that value to the customer and what they expect. So that's an example, but the target condition should always be aligned with whatever the challenge is for the organization, and that can be in a manufacturing environment or in a volunteer organization. And that's why you see in the steps of the Kata how they're all aligned. You don't see a person working on a target condition that's going in the opposite direction of the challenge. They're all connected.
Mm-hmm. So we've got a couple of questions related to coaching. Okay. One sort of comes back to the starter kata, where Helen asks, I have my first coach and they're experienced, but they're not sticking to the card with me and I'm not experienced. Should I insist that we do it all by the book until I have more experience? How do you all handle that as experienced coaches with new learners?
Well, that is a very good question. And, a key part of that is, kind of going back to the kata code, beginners practice the kata exactly. And part of that, and part of the reason why you want to stick to the card is because, again, you're wanting to embed that practice, that mindset, that thinking. Now, there are times when a coach may go a little deeper. They may ask some additional questions. Sometimes I refer to that as stepping away from the card. And that's because, you don't want to just be robotic and go from question to question and there's no learning taking place, and you've just asked the questions for the sake of the questions being asked. But along the way, you may, when you ask what is your target condition, if the learner is unclear, there may be some additional clarifying questions that you should ask, but you should always stick to the coaching card, especially at the beginning. And the other thing to keep in mind as well, as part of being a new learner and learning and practicing the starter kata, it all goes back to the storyboard. So the storyboard for each session should be set up in such a way the information should be there so that, it does follow the 5 question cards. So it may be the case if, there's some opportunity to maybe revisit how the coaching session is being set up, the status of the storyboard, is the coach delving and going into some deeper questions to get the learner to do some additional reflection. But it may warrant, just asking your coach that question. And the other thing about why I enjoy the Kata so much is because the relationship that it builds. It creates a safe space where the learner realizes that they don't have to have the right answer and they're not being judged. This entire experience is to benefit the learner. And as a result of that, trust is built. There's a level of engagement that takes place, and it's all for the benefit of the learner. So that was a very long response to say there could be a number of reasons why that coach may be asking different questions. And you can just simply say, hey, I sat in on a webinar where they talked about, the starter kata and the 5 coaching questions, or the 5 question card. Why are additional questions being asked, or why are we skipping the step, and see what you learn from running that experiment and talking with your coach.
Yeah. So there's a couple related questions related to coaches and organizational capability. One question asks, how do we start Toyota Kata when we have a lack of coaches? Second question says, I love Kata coaching, but there isn't anyone at work to be a second coach for me. What can I do to help reflect on my own? So I guess the question is, how can I be my own second coach? And then there's another question that says, my company is probably not willing to take on the investment in an outside coach. What can we do to build those skills internally? Those are those questions in a nutshell.
Okay. And so that goes back to, what I was sharing earlier, and especially from Tracy Defoe's presentation. The Kata community is one of the most generous communities that I've ever observed. And so a challenge that was issued during KataCon 7 was for coaches to coach without charging. And it doesn't have to be someone that because we realize, and especially with what we experienced last year in the pandemic, different, companies, organizations, they may be challenged, and this investment cost might be a challenge. So I would definitely, the different links that have been shared in terms of how you can connect with the community, especially, the Kata schools, there's so much information that's shared among the Kata Girl Geek community. It's some of the most experienced Kata coaches that are out there. And, there are a number of coaches who are willing to make those services available. And then the other thing too, for the person who asked about, in an environment where you don't have a coach, how do you go about getting a coach and even a second coach? Again, I would go back to all the links that have been shared of how to connect with a coach. You definitely want to do that. And then, I go back to when the company where I worked, it was just myself and one other person. So there was a need to reach out to an external coach. Thankfully, we're in a virtual environment now where, we have Zoom and we have Teams. And, a number of us have been practicing the Kata remotely for a period of time. And that's something that we can do. So, please don't let that be a challenge for you. And if you have questions specifically, my contact information is here. If I'm able to coach you, I will, definitely be willing. And then, like I said, there are a number of us in the Kata community, and I know there are people from different parts of the world. And again, connecting with those Kata schools, that's a great place for resources, for information, and even to get connected with a coach.
There's another coaching question. I have 30 people that report to me. How many should I coach at a time? Should I only coach my supervisor or include others in the coaching sessions as well? So there's a couple questions altogether there from Alan.
Okay. So Alan, the story, or at the start of Kata, it's focusing on coaching one person at a storyboard with a target condition that they're working on. That learner, that improver may be working on a team project, but you have the one person who is involved, who is responsible for updating the storyboard and going through the coaching cycle and asking questions. In terms of what's recommended, it's really according to what your bandwidth is. But one of the things I would encourage is starting small. And it may be the case, because that was my practice. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't, I wanted to make sure everyone had a good experience, and I needed to learn as well as a new coach. And so I started out small. I started out with, coaching my direct reports and each of them having a storyboard, and we practiced as learner and coaches. And then each of them found one person to coach. And Dr. William Harvey at Peter Kramer North America, he has taken his organization. They've been on this journey, I believe, for at least maybe 4 or 5 years. And they have a rather large organization. And they're at a point now to where they have about 20 to 40 improvers and coaches. But what they're learning is as they start out small, focusing on, training, with the senior leaders and training supervisors, and just cascading down to those members of management, and then engaging all the staff, it's beginning to grow and it's sustained because it's a part of the daily practice, it's part of the daily habit, it's incorporated into the work. And as people begin to see the results and how it affects the culture change, more and more people are becoming excited, and it begins to expand and grow. But don't feel like you have to put pressure on yourself that you need to, coach X amount of people. It's okay to start out small, realizing that it's opportunity to grow. And then if you do want to grow your coaches more exponentially, that's again where, take advantage of the online training that's available, take advantage of the resources that are available, from the Kata coaching schools. If you're a coach and you're looking to improve your skills, again, take advantage of the workshop that Tilo has coming up, that helps you to accelerate, your coaching abilities. But don't feel like you have to boil the ocean all at once. You can even, people even apply practicing the kata with introducing the kata. And again, it's not an implementation. It's something that you want to be a part of your regular culture and how it is that you do business. And it's okay to take those, incremental steps at a time to get you where you want to be on that journey.
All right, thanks. Another question from Ahmed, who asks, do you have any advice on coaching people who are non-technical and trying to help them establish an understanding of scientific thinking?
Oh my goodness, yes. And that's been a large part of my work is, working with people who are non-technical and, maybe who even not, maybe who do not have a continuous improvement background, because it starts with, again, the why. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that we're trying to accomplish as an organization or as a team or as a nonprofit or what have you? Everybody has this vision, and then getting the improver or learner to see what it is that they do, either as an employee or as a volunteer or as a board member, how the work that they do connects with that vision. And then get them to thinking about, I like to phrase, although the wouldn't it be great is phrased in the form of for the challenge, to think about the long-term goals. That wouldn't it be great is great to get a new learner or improver thinking about ways to improve their processes, and having some initial dialogue about a target process that they want to focus on, a process that they want to improve, a new skill that they want to develop or learn. And then, once that's identified, really have them doing the work to understand everything about how that process operates. Okay. Graph it out, have them to do a block diagram, not where they have to do a really detailed value stream map or process flow, but what are the, 5 main steps of that process, and understand everything that is incorporated into that. And then from there, helping them to see, well, what's the next small step you want to take on the way to improving upon this process, learning the skill. And, and again, just applying those steps of the improvement kata along the way. And if you don't have the Toyota Kata practice guide, that is another resource. And along with the information from Mike Rother's website, that provides a lot of guidance on how, no matter if a person is not technical, but how they can still apply these steps to whatever process it is that they're a part of. Again, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in an office environment, whether it's a volunteer or, a project that a person is working on within the community.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you for running about 20 minutes long, Deandra, but
No,
thank
no
you to everybody
problem.
for the great questions and for being here today. So, again, I really want to thank our presenter, Deandra Wardell. You can learn more about her and her work at deandrawardell.com. And as you also see there on screen, rootcauseracism.com. And encourage you to check out the different blog series. There are some previous panel discussions that Deandra and or I have hosted and moderated as part of the series. But I'm really glad you could share, I think, a great, introductory view of Toyota Kata, but then it went beyond the introductory with, I think, some great tips and then sharing reflections from KataCon 7. So thank you for bringing all that to us here today, Deandra. Anything you want to say as kind of a last word?
Yes. So again, thank you, Mark, and to everyone who's participating for this opportunity. And I say this all the time. The Toyota Kata, it's life changing. It changed my management style. It has had such an impact on my life. In my vision to create a world of problem solvers, I see Toyota Kata as the way to do that. And wherever there are people and processes, the Toyota Kata works. And so no matter where you are on your journey, if you're brand new, just dip your toe in the water, start practicing, start learning. Don't go it alone. This community is so large. This community is so warm and engaging and encouraging. Get connected in the different ways that I've shared. Get started and don't stop. Continue on your journey, keep moving on to the next one, and make Toyota Kata part of whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your home, whether it's with your hobbies, in your community. Just get connected to the Toyota Kata.
Well, thanks again, Deandra. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you, I hope, for future webinars. Again, the next presentation webinar will be April 14th. You can register at kinexus.com/webinars. I think you'll be able to do so soon. So thanks again. Take care, everyone.